Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Rite Part 3. This is the story of Annalise Michel. After Annalise Michel's death on July 1st, 1976, they would perform an autopsy report where they would find that Annalise Michel had been in a near starvation state for at least a year, and this contributed to her death. They had also found out that she had had broken knees on both knees from spending long periods of times on her knees. And they had also found out at which point that she had also had pneumonia around the time of her death. They had also made statements that if they had gone to get her the right kind of help, even up to a week of her death, she may have survived. And the prosecution would then charge Father Ernst Alt, as well as Father Arnold Renz. And on top of that, they would also charge Joseph and Anna Michel for negligence homicide. It is around this point, as they were getting ready for the trial, the Michels would actually get their own lawyer, whereas the priests would have their defense paid for by the church. The story of Annalise Michel would hit a lot of media coverage, even going as far as the New York Times posting an article on July 14th, 1976. The trial would begin on March 30th, 1978, where both priests and parents would try to defend their case against the prosecution. Now, mind you, when the prosecution went into this trial, they had suggested and asked the courts that they only be fined and not charged with any kind of prison sentence. They would even go as far to say that the parents did not need to have any sentencing done, doing that they had suffered enough. And during the trial, they would bring in multiple doctors to give their kind of point of view of Annalise Michel's state. And they would go and tell the courts that they did not believe that she was possessed by any demons, but it was more of a mental state, and that it had a large part to do with her strict upbringing with the church. Dr. Richard Roth would be one of the doctors that would also not only confirm this, but he would also believe that her epilepsy had a lot to do with her mental state as well. Also keep in mind that Dr. Roth was a doctor that Father Ernst Alt had actually contacted about Annalise Michel's state. So he was very aware of what was going on at the time. Father Ernst Alt, in a light of a lot of these statements that were being made against the church, would also bring in all the information that he had written down and recorded during the exorcisms of Annalise Michel. And with him, he would bring a lot of tape recordings that they had recorded during these sessions. I'm going to play one of these sessions for you, and listening to it now is very creepy. It will actually, for me personally, will make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. After playing the tapes, Father Ernst Alt would then tell the courts that they had successfully freed Annalise Michel of her possessions right before her death. And the bishop that had granted permission of the exorcism would later say that he was not aware of Annalise Michel's alarming health condition. And it is actually speculated that if he had actually known about her health condition on top of what was going on, he may not have granted the exorcism at all. And it should also be noted that during the trial, Joseph would not even stand trial or testify in trial. In April of 1978, the jury would come to a verdict, and they would find all four guilty of negligent homicide. Now, the prosecution had suggested that they only be fined and not charged, but the courts would actually give all four suspended sentences and would also tell the parents and the priests that they would have to share the legal fees. And this was a more stiffer sentencing than what the prosecution had wanted. Later on down the road, author John Duffy would actually make a statement and say that the entire case of Annalise Michel was a complete misidentification of mental illness. And years down the road, the bishops would attend a church conference where they would completely erase all knowledge of Annalise Michel's exorcism. And they would completely denounce her statements of her actually being demonically possessed. On February 25th, 1978, authorities would go to try to exhume the body of Annalise Michel. Around the time that she was buried, she was put in a fairly cheap coffin, and authorities had taken it upon themselves that they wanted to give her a proper coffin and a proper burial, where they would actually go out and purchase a very nice oak coffin. And they would also exhume the body and just see if there was any differences. And they would decide that she was a regular corpse of that state of decay, and there was nothing out of the ordinary. They would also have a service for Annalise Michel after they would put her in her new coffin. And while this was going on, they would completely restrict Annalise's parents and the priests from attending it whatsoever. Joseph and Anna would always say, even up to Joseph's death in 1999, that they did not regret their actions and they felt that they had done the right thing. And in 2013, the home at which the Michels used to reside at would randomly one night catch fire. Now, the reason behind this house fire has been debate for many, many, many people. Half of which would say that they just believe it was just a case of arson. And the other half believe that something sinister still dwelled within that home. When it comes to Annalise Michel, I can't really say, do I think she was possessed or do I think that she had mental illness? And when it comes to her story, it's possibly both. She had temporal lobe epilepsy, which would have reason to believe that she would have these bouts of hallucinations. And considering that she was raised in a very strict Roman Catholic type home, to where sacrifice was considered a way to atone for sin, I can see where she had this mindset that in order to atone for her sin or the world's sin, that she would have to suffer a great deal or die. And the fact that she had such a strict upbringing, I can see why during these epilepsies she would just see people having faces that would look like demons. But at the same time, the audio recordings make me believe that there's something sinister at play. So, is it possible that she was possessed by a malevolent spirit? I'm not one to judge. But I know just by listening to the audio tapes, it's enough to make a believer out of anyone.